Welcome to the Real Estate Syndication Show. Whether you are a seasoned investor or building a new real estate business, this is the show for you. Whitney Sewell talks to top experts in the business. Our goal is to help you master real estate syndication. And now your host, Whitney Sewell.
This is your daily real estate syndication show. I'm your host, Whitney Sewell. Today, our guest is Craig Simpson. Thanks for being on the show, Craig.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here today.
Now, Craig has a unique skill that not everybody has that I feel can be very useful to anybody that's in the real estate business. And but a little about him: he's the owner of Simpson Direct Incorporated, based out of Grants Pass, Oregon. His direct marketing company manages almost 300 different direct mail promotions each year. Wow. His knowledge of direct marketing techniques has helped him become the nation's leading expert in direct mail marketing. He's the author of the Direct Mail Solution and the Advertising Solution, published by Entrepreneur. So, Craig, thank you so much for your time and your willingness to share your expertise with us and really teach us a little bit about this so we can, use some of these marketing techniques ourselves, or even look for somebody like yourself to help us. But give the listeners a little more about, who you are and this, your specialty here. And then let's dive into some ways
Sure.
they can.
You betcha. Yeah. So I'm a direct mail consultant and coach. I've been doing direct mail for over 20 years. So even in this midst of this online world now, where a lot of people are doing things online, I'm still mailing hundreds of millions of mail pieces, physical mail pieces that arrive in a mailbox every day. And what makes direct mail unique, and that could apply to those listening today, is that when you're trying to solicit somebody through the mail, they're forced to make a physical decision as to what to do with your mail piece. They can't click a button and it goes away. They can't change the dial on the TV and it goes away. With mail, it's so tangible that they actually have to physically take it to the trash can or the recycle bin. And that's what makes direct mail so relevant today. It's the one media that requires the prospect to do something with it. So as I'm sure we'll talk about here in a bit, is if you're looking to buy real estate or sell real estate, the idea that the prospect has to do something with your marketing piece physically makes it unique and different.
I hadn't thought about that. It's not as easy just to delete, or like you said, change the channel, or just move on to something else. It's sitting on their table, and they probably set it down. If they're not interested, they set it down, forget about it, but then they see it again. And then they probably see it again. And then, they finally throw it away, but then guess what? They get another one and they see it again, so that's interesting. That I don't know. I haven't heard that before about how it is something physically that they have to make a decision, and it's something in their hands a little longer too than say an email or
That's right.
Something like that.
Yes, very much so.
So this direct mail thing, obviously the listeners are, they're looking for, larger properties, and probably your typical, person that maybe that's using a lot of direct mail, or, I normally hear of like wholesalers or maybe single family buyers using a lot of direct mail, or smaller multis, things like that.
Sure.
But I feel like, there's lots of mom and pop owners who own 50 unit, complexes as well, or even some, 100 plus units as well. And so I feel like, as crazy as the market is right now, everyone is looking for that special deal, and as active as everyone is, this can give us another avenue to market, to find some of those deals. And I'd love for you to walk through a little bit of, some steps or some things that we should consider if we're doing some of our own direct mail. Sure.
There's three big things that you have to keep in mind when you're doing direct mail. Number one is the list, who it is you're going to mail to. Number two is going to be the creative, the copy. What does you say to them? And number three is the offer. What is it you want them to do? The biggest thing to start with is the list. So depending on who you want to approach, that's where we're going to determine what the mail list is. And it's amazing the information we have on prospects today. If you were looking for people who were 70 years and older, and they lived in a 2-story house that was built 20 years ago and was over 2,500 square feet, you could find that mailing list, right? If you're looking for a ranch-style, single-story home that they've been in for 40 years, we can find that list. So the biggest thing to know for you guys is there's a lot of data out there with a lot of information. And if you know who your best prospects are, the people who you normally would buy from or sell to, we can target those groups and find ways to get in touch with them. So that's the biggest thing, is really knowing who it is you want to go to, and then we can find lists that match that criteria.
Well, one, I want to know, like, where a good place for us to start, if we want to try to find a list like that. I mean, it's a little bit scary that there's that much information about just out there for anybody to purchase or to have, right?
Right.
And, however, it is out there. And so, one, where can we find, start to look for some of that information? Maybe have a couple websites we could get started with. Or I guess tell us that, and then I got another question about it.
Sure. So websites, places to go. If you type into your browser, you just go into Google and you type in list broker, there's going to be a whole bunch of brokers that come up. And a list broker is just like a real estate broker. In real estate, if I want to go buy a piece of property in San Francisco, California, I can look at a real estate broker and they can show me any piece of property, and then they would facilitate the deal. And then they would get paid a commission from the person selling the property. The same is true in the list business. There's over 100,000 mailing lists available for rent. If you go to a list broker, they'll work with you and show you all the lists available to you based on the criteria of what you're looking for. And then when you decide to rent or buy that list, they get paid a commission from the person selling the list. So a list brokerage is a great option for anyone out there. And you could, there's hundreds of them. So you could do a search and you could find one that's in your area, or you could just find one across the country and work with them. It doesn't really matter. That's one way. A big list out there, list compiler, is called Info USA. If you just type into Google, Info USA, they have thousands of lists available for rent. And you can basically get in contact with somebody there, and they will help walk through your criteria of who you're looking for, and then they can help you rent that list. So those are the top two ways to go and find a list, probably for this niche. Maybe a question I'd ask you is, who is it you guys would traditionally look for? And maybe I can walk down that path with you.
Yeah, no, that's great. Because I was going to ask you, obviously finding a larger properties, and obviously it's owners that aren't living in the unit. It's not a single family home where somebody's lived there for 40 years, but this is actually maybe somebody that's owned a complex for 30 years, or even 20 years, and it wouldn't even have to be that long, honestly. But so somebody who, and I was trying to think about how to narrow that seller down, by other things that we could kind of, get that list narrowed down. Because you have to know who you want to approach, like you're talking about, or else this list is just going to, it'd just be millions of people, right?
Yeah.
And
one of my most successful mailings I do for real estate investors, and this may or may not apply to your group, and you can tell me, it's those who are going after absentee owners. So they own a home, but they don't live in it. And for a lot of investors, they're looking for the person that just has one home, maybe two, because they're usually inexperienced. Maybe they owned a home, they moved out of it and bought another piece of property, and they thought, hey, let's go in the rental business and let's go ahead and rent this home out. And then they've done that for a little bit of time, and they've realized this is kind of a pain, and I'm not into this. I don't want to do this anymore.
In our case, they're always going to be absentee. And so, because it's a large complex. Let's say it's, 20 units or more, 50 units or more, something like that. And so that's, they're always going to be absentee, but it's going to be a larger property. But it's still, we can find mom and pop owners, and that's where we can find deals, because they're usually going to be self-managing and things like that, where we can create more value. And so that's, that's our bread and butter, in the business. So it's going to, it could possibly be somebody, over a certain age, somebody that's owned the property a certain amount of time, certain number of units. I'm sure the listener would like to be able to narrow it down by, say this many units or more.
If you, for example, if you know the age of the average person that's going to sell to you, that's super helpful. Maybe it's somebody who's 70 or 75 years old. They've owned it for a long time. They're ready to unload it. We can narrow this down by age. We can also do a commercial property versus private. So if we're looking for commercial, or if we're looking for like apartment buildings or duplexes, we can do those as well. So in some cases, not all lists, in some cases, they'll tell us if they're a property owner of more than one unit or units. So do they own more than one apartment complex or not? A lot of that data we have available to us.
Okay, and it would be possible, but sometimes these mom and pop owners, they bought that one complex,
Yeah.
30 years ago, and they've self-managed it the whole time, and that's the only complex that they've owned, or possibly they purchased another one, in town that's similar or something like that. So no, that's interesting. That we can, it would be commercial property more times than not, because that's probably going to be 5 units or more,
Yeah.
as far as that's concerned. And so no, that's great. And so, it would be commercial property. It would be probably somebody that's, say 60 or older. And then let's say, if I get this list and let's say we say commercial property, 60 years or older, and maybe we say, okay, this, city, this demographic
Yep.
area, I guess, how narrowed down can we get there, to different specific submarkets, or is it going to be like one big city? What's that going to
No,
look like?
it's what's wonderful is, so we could give an address and we could say, give us a 5-mile radius of this address. Now, if you're in a smaller market, say Wichita, Kansas, you're not going to have as many opportunities as somebody in the Los Angeles area, right? Because of the number of people available with that information is going to be much smaller. So if you're in a small city, it's going to be tougher to get it. Maybe you get up a list of one or two, right? If you're in a big market, maybe it's a list of hundreds. It all depends on the market size.
Okay. So now we've went to Info USA, or we've contacted somebody like yourself, or, we've got this list, but now we have to come up with this thing we're going to mail to them, right? Whatever that may be. And, I'd love to know, is that going to vary too? I'd love to get into some details of what we need to have in that and what that needs to look
Sure.
like. But however, maybe it varies between somebody that owns a single family home, say a wholesaler's contacting them, as opposed to somebody that's maybe a little more sophisticated, or, owns a larger apartment complex.
Yeah. I mean, who you're going after on the list is going to greatly determine what it is you're going to say to them. If you're going after the single family residents and you're doing, more residential, the type of mail piece you use is going to be different than the guy who's in the commercial space. For those that are doing residential, what we found that works best is the inexpensive 3x4 postcard and sending them multiple times. They're really cheap to mail, and you can mail a whole bunch of them for really inexpensive. And you guys have probably seen that. When we get to the commercial side, we have to be a little more savvy, and we tend to do better with like a 2-page sales letter that goes in an envelope, handwritten address, and we make it personal. So if we're mailing into a market, say it's Portland, Oregon, we're going to reference things in that market to make a deeper connection. Maybe we're going to reference a famous coffee shop, or we're going to, hey, we've bought property near the Starbucks on 3rd and Elm Street or something, right? So we're telling the buyer, the seller of the property, that we know their area, we know the market, we're personable, relational, and we're trying to create a different level of connection than like a cold business letter would do, right? So when we solicit them and we're trying to get information, we're trying to make it feel like they know us already. And that's by mentioning key landmarks and things in that area is going to make that connection deeper. So that's why we would use a 2-page letter instead of just a simple cheap postcard.
Yeah, it's all about knowing who you're approaching, right? Who you're sending this to. It goes back to that. So that's awesome. And what else in the copy? What else should we have in that? Other than maybe something, referencing something local, and anything else as far as mentioning the specific property, or maybe a meeting or something like that.
Yes, totally. So, I mean, if ultimately we're not going to come out and say, hey, can you sell me your property at a discount, right? That's not going to happen. So we have to come up with creative ways to talk about what it is we want. And maybe ultimately it is a face-to-face meeting that we're asking for. And maybe it's to say something like, hey, I noticed that you own property, you own this 123 Elm Street. I'm purchasing similar properties to those. I'd love to get some advice and feedback from you. Maybe we can collaborate and talk about it. So you're not coming right out and saying that you want to buy it from, but you're also not saying that you don't. You're just talking how you guys have this common interest in properties like 123 Elm Street. And boy, I would love to buy you a cup of coffee at the Starbucks on 3rd and Elm. Something like that. In fact, I wouldn't even use Starbucks. I would use a local coffee shop that's a little bit more personal and friendly, right? We don't want to be the big branded thing. We want to be more personal. That's the whole concept of this. So you'd want to talk about that. Sometimes I have clients who will put their photo in there or a picture of their family, and hey, this is the kind of things we like to do. Just mentioning things in passing and connecting it to why they want to talk. We're immersed in the Elm Street area. My family's lived here for 20 years. My kids go to the school down the street. Boy, I'm interested. I'd love to know more about your property there. Could we sit down and talk? Because I'm interested in those and maybe some others like it. You follow what I'm saying here? Does it kind of make sense on how we make this personal?
It does. It does. It's very different than, say, somebody that's wholesaling that. And I was thinking about, this offer, because we talked about the list, the copy, the offer, and I feel like, our offer for somebody that has a larger commercial property is, we're trying to get to just that meeting and have them feel like it's a personal meeting and, kind of develop some rapport and friendship where, say a single family or residential, they're really finding those people who are desperate to sell, right? They need to have a problem. They're needing to sell right then. And so, they may have a specific number on there, right? I'll pay you this much today or this week or, something like that. But I like how you said, as far as a commercial property, it's a different type of offer, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And you've made a very, very clear point here that I don't want anyone listening to miss. With a residential, it's all based on pain. It really is. That's the reason why they're gonna sell it. They're tired of being renters or dealing with a distressed property or dealing with family members that live in it. They hate it. They want to get out. But on commercial, it's so different, and we really have to be clear about that. And I'm glad that you specified the difference between the two. It's very important for everyone to catch.
So, what are some other distinctions maybe you've seen to help us to be more successful in this? I've heard of lots of different techniques, like, leaving the envelope unsealed, and or handwritten versus printed, or, printed font that looks like it's handwritten, things like that. So what are some of your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So there is some very big things. There are simple things to do, but are big in terms of response. So handwritten is always important. Always handwrite the thing. If you're going to we're not mailing to tens of thousands of people. We're mailing to hundreds and very qualified people. So let's handwrite it, and let's make it in blue ink. Let's make it not the standard black. Make it a plain white envelope, no return address. Don't let them know who it comes from, but with a handwritten address. Now, when you get a plain white envelope with a handwritten address, there is nobody who's going to throw that away because they don't know what's inside. It could be from their aunt. It could be from a friend. They're clueless. So they're forced to open it. The other thing I like to do is the stamp is much more important than you can imagine. Like when you put a Liberty Bell or a flag stamp, that's the most common types of stamp, and that could make it look mass mailing. What I prefer to do is let's find the commemorative stamps that are just released. Maybe it's trains, or maybe it's one of the recent presidents. Maybe it's there's ones with the national rivers, the famous rivers in the United States, or maybe it's one that has like a thing that's about your specific state. Maybe it has something about the state of Iowa. Well, if there is, use that stamp. Like right now, for example, there's this river stamp, and it has all these famous rivers in the United States. Well, there's one called the Deschutes River, which is right near where I live. If I were going to go to somebody in my area, I'm going to get a whole bunch of those stamps and put it on there because that's going to connect with them on a deeper level. This isn't a flag or a Liberty Bell like everyone else is using. This is different and unique. So when you think about everything you do with this, you want it to look personal. What else can you do? They open it up. They've got this typed letter. If you were to take a highlighter and just highlight some things, a red pen and circle some things, now all of a sudden it looks like you typed this on your computer, which you did, and now somebody's physically going through and marking it up to make things stand out. Oh, that just makes the response that much better. And if you want to go the extra mile, throw a Post-it note on it that says something nice. Hey, Bob, thought you would like to hear from me on this. Please take a moment and read this letter. They open up the letter, they read it. I mean, these are things that get people to respond.
I tell you, I look at other industries too and how they do this as well. And so I got this, and you'll probably appreciate this. I got this letter in the mail, I don't know, last week or the week before, and it's from a car dealership. And there was a letter inside, and it had that yellow Post-it at the top. I can't even remember what it said now, but Whitney, please read this, or, we want to buy your car. They're wanting to buy our car. Sure. And so, but the printout was a printout of an email supposedly from this person's boss telling him to contact me to buy my car.
Yeah.
It's like, I did read it, but just mostly because I'm interested in how they do marketing,
I actually have a piece like that I do for a company that sells food to the prepper niche, the survivor prepper niche. And we sell this food you can store for 20 years. And we do the whole email thing. It's looked like an email. It is an email. We print it out. We make it look photocopied, and then we put a real letter with it. And we're showing them the evidence of why we're doing this. And it works every time. So yeah, there's some fun things like that. Now, I don't know if that would work for this space, just because who's going to be telling you to go buy this property, look at this property. But the idea is right, that it's unique and different and personal, and that's what we want. That's what everyone is looking for.
And I really like the touch of just the plain white envelope, and even having it handwritten, and the stamp. I haven't really thought about the importance of the type of stamp, and even something local on that stamp. That's really smart, and it's something they're probably, if they're local, they're going to recognize that. So how often, or I guess I was going to say, how often do we mail this? But do you leave the envelope open, or do you always seal it?
No, I close it because I worry something might fall out. I have heard that before. I know that there's some that will fold it over and stuff it in there, right? So it's not sealed. But I don't know how. I've always sealed it, and I've had just great success with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how often are you mailing? How often, if we're mailing this type of person that owns this 50 to 100 unit complex, how often should they receive our mail?
So I would try and hit them multiple times, like 2 or 3 times over the course of 3 weeks, mailing 7 to 10 days apart. First one would go out, then 7 to 10 days later, mail a second one and put somewhere in there on the top in red handwriting. So it's basically the same letter, but you're saying, Frank, I have not heard from you. I wanted to make sure you didn't miss this. And then maybe 2 weeks later, a week later, Frank, hey, I sent you 2 correspondences. Really important that you get in touch with me. Please, can we sit down and have a cup of coffee, see the letter inside, right? So you're kind of trying to make it push a little harder each time. I would do a series of 2 or 3 letters, take a break for a month or 2, and then come back and do it again. There is definitely going to be some things with consistency that helps these guys respond. So multiple times is good.
No, I like that. And you're calling them by name, and you're saying it's not just the same thing over and over and over.
Right.
I mean, then it's obvious, right? What you're doing. But it's much more personable when you're referencing that recent letter. So how are you tracking that? If you're sending a bunch of these, how would you track to know, okay, I did send this person. Okay. What does that look like?
Well, I try and send them. Well, first of all, I try and send them in batches, because if I'm just doing 1 or 2 a day, it can get real confusing on the timing. So if I'm going to do 100 of these, I'm going to mail all 100 this Friday. And then the next 100 of the follow-up letter, step 2, is going to go out the following Friday or 10 days from there. And you're going to mail them all at once. I think that's really important. Those that try and do pieces here and there are the ones that get out of sequence. They end up sending the same person the same letter twice, So I try and do it in batches. I think that's super important. As far as tracking, you have a mail list. And let's say if you have 2 mail lists, you've got those names, so you can look back and see which one they came from and determine which mail list worked better for them.
Okay. And so when should we stop mailing?
Oh boy, that's a tougher one. I mean, if they obviously call up and say, I'm done, but I think you've probably seen this too, where there's somebody that you've followed up with for years and all of a sudden they bite and you're like, oh, I'm so glad I didn't stop following up with them. I've heard of investors getting deals from people that they've been mailing them for 2 years and they finally caved in. But they said, we were going to work with you because we've gotten all this mail from you. So we decided that when it was time, you were the one we were going to go with. Right. So that helps. I don't have a specific number of when to stop. I feel like if your market only has 100 people and with the specific parameters you're looking for, don't ever stop. Constantly go after them until they say no.
So my hand's getting pretty tired if I'm writing 100 letters. So, is that something that, hiring that out? So I used to do some direct mail. It's been a few years ago, but I had a virtual assistant, and so a lot of people ask me about using virtual assistants, but I had one of them actually handwriting, letters and mailing them for me. Is that something you see that's common, or something you do?
I think it's very important, because if you are the one doing it and you're exhausted from doing it, your motivation for sending these out week after week is going to go away. it's better to have somebody else do the manual labor side of it. It may cost you a little bit up front to pay them to do it, but it will be well worth it. Because you want the motivation. You want to be excited about the marketing of it and the selling of it and the buying, but you don't want to be the one dreading that you have to do this. So, put it in someone else's hand.
Wow. Anything else about the direct mail that we just have to know, Craig, that's like, wait a minute, if you're going to do this, well, you've got to know this about direct mail?
I think the last big thing is timing. I would be real careful with when you do this. If you're going to try and do this between Thanksgiving and Christmas, not a great time. It's people are distracted. I try and never mail before a holiday. So if Memorial Day is coming up, I'm not going to mail and have my mail arrive the week before that weekend because people are busy. I'm not going to mail just before the 4th of July because I know people are busy. Now, it's okay to mail right after it, but just don't make your mail pieces hit right around a holiday because they will lose interest. They're more likely to get tossed. So really look at a calendar and say, okay, here are the dates I want to avoid due to holidays. And then here's when I can map out the schedule and do it because the timing is right.
Great advice. Yeah. And so, Craig, what is a way that you have recently improved your business that we could apply to ours?
Well, for me, I write books. So writing a book for me establishes you and gives you credibility. And so I've written 2 books. And so that really helps me out. And I think even in your space, there's got to be something to writing a free report. Maybe you don't have to write a book. Maybe it's a couple different reports that establishes you as the expert and makes those people who you're buying from want to work with you.
For sure. A lot of people in this space are writing books now. And I can see that. It's just like having a podcast or some way to distinguish yourself. It's a different type of thought leadership. So, and what's the one thing that you would say has contributed to your success?
Well, I think that you always have to be marketing. I think you never stop. I think that even when you're busy running the business and you're busy making deals, that's never enough. You never want to rest on your laurels there. You want to keep going. And so no matter how busy I am and how full my client load is, I'm always marketing myself and promoting. And I think that we business owners can get to the place where they're comfortable and they stop doing that, and then business starts to dry up and now they've got to restart the machine. I say always run the machine, always be marketing. I think that's a key to the success of my business, at least.
Nice. Yeah. And how, I guess, is there a way you've recently improved your marketing?
I don't know.
Like constant thing that we're all always trying to improve, but anything that you've recently done?
Nothing. I mean, nothing out of the ordinary. I mean, I'm writing a 3rd book now. I'm constantly blog. I constantly send out emails. I send out direct mail. I try and do it all. So I don't know if there's one thing. I think it's just really doing everything you can to constantly market.
Nice. Well, Craig, you've been a great guest, and I appreciate you just elaborating on the skill that you have that I think is beneficial to all of us. And I would like for you to say too, how does somebody like myself work with somebody like you? What does your business do for us as far as the direct mail, and what does that look like?
So I do 2 things. I manage direct mail campaigns, and my team and I send out over 300 different mailings every year. That's 300 different print jobs, 300 different sets of list orders, 300 different tracking reports. I mean, we do A to Z. That's not a fit for everyone, but that's our core business, is managing direct mail campaigns for clients. The other part is coaching. It's where we come alongside, we coach you through doing the campaign yourself. So maybe you're a smaller business and you want to do it yourself, but you need somebody looking over your shoulder to give you feedback on copy or design or list. That's the coaching side of my business, where I do a lot of one-on-one coaching and helping people get into the mail and grow their business that way.
Great. Wow. Well, before we have to go, how do you like to give back?
Well, I do actually do a lot of volunteer work. I'll help nonprofits. I'll give them feedback and suggestions on marketing. Sometimes I'll coordinate campaigns, but I'm a huge believer in giving back. So definitely always trying to work with nonprofits and doing those kinds of things.
And then, before we have to go, obviously tell the listeners how they can get in touch with you and learn more about your business.
Yeah, the best way is just to go to my website, which is simpson-direct.com, simpson-direct.com. or type in Craig Simpson direct mail in Google and I'll pop up.
Thank you for listening to the Real Estate Syndication Show, brought to you by Life Bridge Capital. Life Bridge Capital works with investors nationwide to invest in real estate, while also donating 50% of its profits to assist parents who are committing to adoption. Life Bridge Capital, making a difference, one investor and one child at a time. Connect online at www.lifebridgecapital.com for free material and videos to further your success.